Welcome to our podcast. This is another recorded episode of Stay Classy San Diego at KCBQ with video production provided by MaxLux Media with your host, myself, Steve Wyer. This podcast is dedicated to keeping you informed and engaged with the latest news and trending events in the San Diego region. Join us on a weekly exploration as we sit down with prominent political figures, insightful analysts, industry professionals, and influential community members.
Well, I'm really excited today to have an old colleague of mine on, Steve Puterski, who you've hosted the show, what was it, twice by yourself?
Yeah.
And in addition, we had an episode when all the fallout from the Nathan Fletcher scandal came down. Was that back in May?
About May.
About May. So really excited to have him back on the show. For those of you who don't know, in addition to having worked at the Coast News, Steve Puterski is a 20-year veteran reporter, publisher of the North County Pipeline on Substack. The digital publication covers North County and focuses on a variety of subjects from development, real estate, to the interesting people who make North County unique. So in today's episode, I wanted to sort of pick Steve's brain on some of the hot button issues surrounding North County and really regional San Diego news in general. We have a lot to discuss, but before we get going, I wanted to give you an opportunity, Steve, to sort of go over what the North County Pipeline is, sort of like how this came about, what makes it unique, and sort of what kind of news it, what is sort of the news messaging of it?
Sure. It's a digital publication on Substack, and so it's an email newsletter based on subscriptions, whether they're free subscriptions or a premium. And basically, I just kind of wanted to branch out on my own and kind of cover the things I wanted to cover a little bit more than what I was previously doing at Coast News. And it's not a knock on Coast News; they're a great organization over there, but so it just gave me a little bit more freedom and things to do and find little interesting stories that, make the North County unique, but also, some of the more bigger underlying issues, of course. It's just, it's been a grind. It's been a lot of work. You create your own kind of company, as you know. And so there's a lot of that goes into it, but, so far the reaction's been really great. I'm looking forward to more.
Brilliant. Just to so people know, this North County Pipeline, so it's on Substack. You guys working on some social media, website, anything else? Or
so you can go to ncpipeline.substack.com. We have a Twitter feed, NC Pipeline, and of course my own Twitter feed as well.
All right, awesome. Well, Steve, you've been in this business a lot longer than me, and you've been in San Diego a lot longer than me. And I wanted to do this episode because I feel like there's some of these topics that I've covered and that you've covered as well. It's sort of better for two than one to sort of speak to some of these topics. One thing that's coming up already, and I can't believe it because it seems like we just had elections. It's already been, a year now? A little less than a year. But we're already talking about elections again, like a little bit. To some extent, I feel like for the supervisor races that we're about to talk about, the Nathan Fletcher scandal sort of brought on talk of elections sooner than, at least for the super races, sooner than otherwise would have been expected.
Yeah.
For that race, there was a primary, right? And now there's going to be the runoff election. And then there's also District 4. So just for people who aren't familiar, so District 3 is Tara Lawson-Remer, and she's being challenged currently by Kevin Faulconer, who is the former mayor of San Diego from 2013-2020. He also ran for governor unsuccessfully, right?
Correct, yeah.
Against Newsom during the governor's runoff. So, and then in District 4, we have the vacant seat of Nathan Fletcher, who's, essentially disappeared from political life after the fallout from the sexual misconduct scandal. And you have two candidates who, to be honest, I hadn't really heard of before they put foot into the race. So we have Montgomery Stepp, and we also have Amy Reichert, who are going to be preparing for the November runoff in the District 4 race to replace said Fletcher. And I want to talk a little bit about these candidates. But first of all, what do you think is some things to watch in either of these races in terms of sort of shaking up the dynamic? I mean, with Fletcher, there's an opportunity to sort of shake that seat up. And with the other district, whether Faulconer sort of has a viable shot at, unseating the Democrat. What are your thoughts there?
Yeah, so in the special election race that's coming up in November for District 4. Monica Montgomery Stepp is a current city councilwoman in the city of San Diego, and a progressive Democrat. Trying to, a lot of focus on her stuff is, I think, the diversity, equity, inclusion. Obviously it was a pretty brutal primary with Janessa Goldbeck and in a race and some blowback there from alleged non-support of police. But, and then Reichert, she ran a couple years ago against Fletcher, got crushed. But it's a vastly Democratic area. So I don't really see Reichert pulling it out. But the question is if she does have a chance, with the homeless issue, maybe some positions on SANDAG and the power that could come with, or the representative that could come, from the Board of Supervisors, do those voters kind of turn a little bit? And plus it's a non-election year, so lower turnout. So, that one's going to be, I would give Monica like a solid W there. Sure. And now for the other one, of course, Faulkner, he's the high profile guy. He ran against Newsom in the recall. He was San Diego mayor for 8 years. But he comes with baggage, and most specifically, Ash Street, the whole scandal there, that real estate development where the city of San Diego purchased the old Sempra headquarters. They didn't do any due diligence. It was a sloppy job. And instead of purchasing it, they did a lease. So they're paying millions more. And then it comes out that there's all this, they can't even use the building because of asbestos and all these issues. And so there's all these lawsuits that have been flying around, but he was one of the key architects along with Todd Gloria in that deal. So, that's a big albatross for him. Obviously, when he talks about homeless people, will say, well, you were mayor of San Diego for X amount of years and you did nothing about it. So it's going to be a challenge, but, because it's a lean blue district for sure. Now that Carlsbad has been redistricted into Lawson Rimmer's district. But, there are some concerns with Lawson Rimmer as well that I've heard from many people. She doesn't attend or like to attend open public comment. She'll just leave the dais. You really can't do that. And if you're elected official, regardless, I know there are some people out there that, go to the extreme in public comment and it's brutal and they say some pretty awful things, but you just kind of have to sit there and take it and just, let it wash over you. And is she, again, with going back to some of these, climate issues and tax initiatives that come with that, and already the cost of living, it's hard to say, yeah, we need to pay for more. And then out the second side, you come back and say, well, cost of living so high, we have to do something about it. So something's got to give there. That one's going to be a tight race, I think. I think Faulkner definitely has a shot just because, he's got the name recognition. And for people who don't follow, the city of San Diego or politics, they might not have even heard of Ash Street and some of these scandals. So
sure,
could be an advantage for him.
Maybe like ancient history for a lot of memories. We already talked about like who these people are a bit, but I just wanted to emphasize that for the other race, District 4, so Monica Montgomery Stepp and Amy Reichert. You already sort of like briefly introduced them, but Stepp is, as you said, the current city council representative of District 4 of San Diego, and she is focused mainly right now, as I gather, on issues of criminal justice reform, issues of community investment. She is really focused from the Union Tribune's reporting on things like jail deaths. Yep. She is really focused on promoting accountability and police oversight. Yes. Pushing for Measure B, which would create a sort of oversight commission, right? I'm not super familiar with the measure, but I generally know that that's sort of like what her agenda is. Just for a bit of context too, like with the jail death stuff, I mean, it seems like that's been like sort of ongoing now for a while. I did some digging into it. So there's been 11 jail deaths this year in San Diego County. There's 19 last year, which I was sort of like, okay, well, what do those numbers actually mean? Like, what does that actually tell us? Like, is that significant? And so me and my team sort of ran some numbers about like what the state like database actually is of San Diego County compared to comparable counties. And what we found was that San Diego County is actually the only county in the whole state to have a statistically significant number of excess jail deaths in the system. So it's definitely a huge problem. It's definitely something that deserves some form of oversight. It's, in my opinion, probably not a good look for the sheriff's office. So I think there's definitely, she has something, she has sort of an agenda to push there in terms of oversight, accountability.
Absolutely.
And then on the other hand, she's also talking a lot about homelessness. She wants to create, more shelters, housing for low-income families, strengthen eviction protections for tenants. And then this is where they sort of clash too, and that's where it sort of gets interesting, is Reichert is specifically an opponent of what's called the housing first approach to the homelessness issue. She's very explicit about that. She does not think that focusing solely on housing is the appropriate approach of government, and as many politicians on the right in California would agree with her. And to be fair, like other politicians as well. But so she is basically, Reichert is basically advocating for more comprehensive like mental health treatment centers. She's advocating for drug, substance, alcohol abuse. So it's interesting because we've done some episodes on homelessness on the show, and sort of like it always comes down to like sort of housing first versus like opponents of housing first. So it seems like that's sort of kind of one of the issues. And then the other issue that's happening is the apparently there's some sort of controversy over Montgomery Steppe calling Reichert a science denier. But like, do you have any thoughts in terms of like sort of how these candidates clash, or how this race could shape out in terms of the political issues affecting this district? I mean, I know you don't think it's necessarily going to be a competitive race, but at least like what should people be looking for?
Yeah. So for Monica, obviously Black Lives Matter was a big thing, and a turning point, I think, in her career. And the jail deaths, she's not the only one who's been concerned about that. And this issue goes way back to even before Kelly Martinez won the election and under Bill Gore, and consistently have been rated, like you said, not only one of the worst in California, but one of the worst in the country. So, this is money that the county still has to fork over, because there's things that, systemic issues that aren't being addressed in the county jails. And so she's really focused on that and bringing, some oversight. That's going to be a tough hill to climb, I think, because law enforcement lobby is very powerful. And I don't know if how that's going to fly maybe on a county level. They may already have some sort of commission that's just not activated. Like San Diego had one that gives oversight to police, but they really never engage it. And then, came out that nobody's really been appointed. And then finally, once that hit, kind of the media and put a spotlight on it, they started appointing people. So that one's going to be a tough hill to climb, but it's a worthy cause, I would think. And as far as her calling Reichert, a science denier, I mean, there's kind of par for the course in DemV politics these days. Anybody who questions, anything COVID related is automatically, is just automatically painted with that brush. And to be fair too, to Reichert, Monica is. She's done that kind of stuff before. She, when she was first elected to San Diego City Council, she immediately kind of came out and called Jen Campbell a racist, and it all had to do with who was San Diego Council president. So it's just some title that the public doesn't care about. And so it got dragged on for over a year. They tried to recall Jen, didn't work.
Recall who? Sorry?
Jen Campbell.
Okay. Yeah.
And so she can be she has an abrasive approach that a lot of Dems I know have said and feel. But I mean, she's probably going to be the clear winner. So we'll see if she can, kind of work with her colleagues on the board to get any of these reforms done with the jail system. And it's tough too, because Martinez is an elected official, so she's not necessarily beholden to the board in some respects. So it'll be an interesting couple of years on that, because they have to do something about it. There's just no question.
Do you feel like the issue of jail deaths is more, because Martinez has been in office since what, November?
Last year she was elected.
So do you feel like the issue of jail deaths is more of like a bad look for the previous sheriff's administration, or do you think that Martinez is sort of like taking the brunt of that already?
Oh, I mean, she was under sheriff under Bill Gore, so it's still on her as well.
It's still on her record.
Yeah. So, I mean, it doesn't look good for anybody who's in the brass of the sheriff's department, and or people who are, in the jails or work in the jails. And so I don't know what the communication is like from jail deputies to the superiors and up the food chain. If any of those concerns from those jail deputies are actually being met, or if they're just being slow walked, or what happens, or because of it's a massive organization. Sometimes it takes those organizations a while to turn and to pivot, but the same time, you'd think on something like this, you'd want to move pretty quickly on. And even if it's just a stopgap measure for now, until you can get more formalized ideal plans in place, something's got to go.
I don't know if I'm harping on the subject too much, but Steve, do we have any idea why so many people are dying in San Diego jails?
That's kind of, the question, because it could be a lot of things: smuggling of drugs and not proper medical care from the staff. It's a variety of things, I think, and I think that's one reason why it's such a challenge too. And so, things can happen in jail that the deputies don't see, and is that on them? Maybe not. But yeah, from what all I've read, there's some drug issues, there's some medical issues, and then not being able to get treatment in a time or the appropriate treatment for these inmates.
Okay, interesting. And I do want to talk about like drugs and sort of how that's going to sort of tie into like sort of the border issues we're going to talk about too a little later. But first of all, before we move on from the supervisor races, I think for District 3, Faulkner versus Lawson Reamer, again, just sort of going over sort of the highlight issues, sort of like where they clash, like what does that look like? So Faulkner like sort of focuses on issues of homelessness, which, as you pointed out, he was mayor for 7-8 years, and people say he doesn't do anything. And at the same time, he's focused on public safety. Everybody, especially I feel like people who lean right in California, are extremely concerned about crime levels,
sure,
violent crime levels. And then on the other hand, Lawson Reamer was extremely dismissive of Kevin when he entered the race. I read a quote from I think it was a UT article. It said, from Lawson Reamer, Kevin Faulkner was a complete failure as a mayor. He's a lifelong politician, has been running for office, has no moral compass, claiming to be a moderate, but voted for Trump in 2020 and defended the vote even after the January 6, 2021 insurrection. So it seems like she's sort of going for, and I feel like from what I've observed, it's kind of an effective strategy, like the Trump label,
yeah,
like sort of tying a prominent Republican to the MAGA movement.
Yep.
What else do you see going on here?
And I think it's her trying to get out ahead of the situation as well, because he is he's a bigger brand than she is, right? Or a name, because he was mayor for so long, so he's ingrained in people. Now, whether that's an advantage or a disadvantage for him, that remains to be seen. And again, do the voters, because in a maybe more in a less blue district, do they see enough from Tara on things that are concerning to them to justify a second term? There are some concerns like we touched on, but I think this is a lot of her just it's positioning, it's getting ahead of stuff and already planting seeds, right? So we already know she's going to hit with the MAGA stuff. That's just pretty much going to happen across the board with any Republican candidate, regardless of how moderate they might be or anti-Trump they might be. And so that's obviously going to be a strategy for it. Will it work? I don't know. Maybe it depends on what happens at the national level as well. Like if if Trump gets the nomination, but I don't really see Faulkner as a Trump guy. Yeah, he voted for him, but it's because he's Republican. So that's, Republicans are going to vote for their person. Like Democrats do the same thing. So
yeah. I will say that, again, I've only ever been a local reporter. I've never covered national politics, but I will say that in San Diego County last election cycle, what I noticed was, again, sort of a successful campaign strategy by some Dems, including Catherine Blakespear, who was running for State Senate, District 38, against Matt Gunderson. And then we had Mike Levin, who was running to retain his seat in Congress against Brian Marriott. And both those Democratic candidates, I was about to say incumbents, but I guess Blakespear wasn't incumbent yet, were able to successfully, it seems, because they won at least, so I assume there's something there, tie their opponents to the MAGA movement and sort of dismiss them as Trump far-right extremists. What is there do you agree that that's like an effective strategy, or how do Republican candidates in 24, again, at the local level, we're talking local level, sort of push back against that?
Yeah, it's an effective strategy. I mean, they won a lot of races. I think a caveat to those two races too was because of the overturn of Roe v. Wade. So they really hammered that message home of being, that it was a terrible decision by the Supreme Court. So I think that helped out a lot, even though, Gunderson has said, hey, I support, yeah. And so, but there may have been some other issues, and he may not have been as more familiar down south, south of Orange County where he's from. But yeah, I think that's the tough thing for Republicans. There are a lot of just moderate ones out there that I've covered that, they're not a MAGA type or a real hard line right. They're just kind of more moderate. They're just here to, hey, let's get things done, get solutions, and let's not like try to, crack everyone's savings account open to do it.
Sure.
So it's a tough strategy, but I think the ones who, maybe have some name recognition already can get away from that and sway voters.
Sure. One more question before we move on to a different subject is on the subject of the Republican Party. I think we both agree that in the last few years, since he who must not be named was elected in 2016, there was a huge schism in the Republican Party of MAGA versus non-MAGA, and that plays out into federal politics, state politics, local politics. Where do you think that in San Diego County the Republican Party sort of falls in terms of do they seem to make any kind of concerted or even individual effort to distance themselves from that brand, or do they, by contrast, like pretty much embrace it? What do you think?
I think it's kind of all over the place, to be honest. I think there's different factions within the party. You're going to have your hard rights, and you're going to have, some are just, kind of like your Reagan conservatives, and then you have some who are just more moderate. It's really dependent. I think it may depend on geography as well. So you might have a little bit more of the hard stuff in East County versus North County or in San Diego area. It's also too, so I don't know if like I don't think you can brand them all as.
Yeah, it's not like one or the other.
Yeah. I mean, I would say it's more closely like that in some ways on the surface of Democrats, because they all seem to be pulling, and we'll probably get into this, on the same thread as far as policy, and here's all the things that we need to do.
They have united front. Yeah.
Right. And a little
mostly.
But even on bad ideas and things that don't necessarily make sense. So that's the problem with them, because then identity politics is a big part of their brand as well. So,
well, the United Front thing probably seems to me like it works for Democrats on the whole, right? Because even if their message is a bad idea, at least they're united, and so they're able to win an election. But on the other hand, I don't think the identity politics, and I don't really want to get into it, but I don't think the identity politics has been a winning strategy recently, and I'll stop that there. I did want to get to something that we touched on earlier. So we kind of briefly mentioned it was, the drugs coming across the border, the prisons, like fentanyl epidemic, which, I mean, again, like I say this all the time on the show, but it's just such a visible issue, like in terms of downtown San Diego, like on the streets, you see people who are clearly suffering from addiction, and people are asking like, where the heck is like this fentanyl coming from? Like, where are these drugs coming from? And there's a large contingent of politicians, including Bill Wells. Don't get mad at me, Richard Bailey, but I think I'd put you into this column too. Probably Supervisor Jim Desmond, who would say that it goes back to a lack of control over the border, and specifically with the recent surge in migrants coming from Mexico to San Diego. So I wanted to talk about sort of the migrant crisis that's happening at the border. And when I say migrant crisis, to be clear, I'm not taking a position on the issue. It's just sort of how that's been characterized in most mainstream media outlets. So migrant crossings along the United States southern border have risen. I mean, San Diego County, Texas, all over the place, everywhere there's a border, it's been rising. More than 8,000 apprehensions last Monday in a single day. So 8,000 people were apprehended by, those are the people that were caught crossing.
Right.
So not just counting it, people who, got away with it. According to the Department of Homeland Security, straining federal resources, overwhelming crowded facilities. And then there's this whole other issue of migrant drop-offs at transit stations, which I find interesting. So basically what's happening is from the border, these migrants are taken to various transit stations distributed throughout the county, and essentially just left there to fend for themselves.
Yep.
At least that's what it seems like. Jim Desmond is a huge critic of this policy, of the drop-offs at the transit stations. And he actually wrote a tweet the other day on Twitter, or should I call it X now? 2,000 migrants from around the world have been dumped in San Diego County in 4 days. The Biden administration is rolling out the red carpet for this chaos, showing zero concern for our region's resources. Bill Wells with El Cajon says something similar. So my question to you is, given the, this is a very polarizing issue.
Yes.
People have a lot of strong feelings. It's, I don't think it's a secret that it's like, kind of a, there is some like identity politics, some like racial elements to the discussion around immigration policy, and people just have very strong opinions about either way. So how do you see this situation playing out politically, either like advantageously for some or not so advantageously for others?
I think it just depends where you live. So like Oceanside, for example, 500 people have been dumped, I guess, if you will, as if that's the right word, from this crisis so far in San Diego County. So that's an extra 500 people that don't have a home, don't have resources, for a city that's already got either, depending on the day, the first or second worst homeless issue in North County. So that's an abundance, and that takes away from your policing. That could, your public safety, a little common mind. Like, it's just tough to see how it could be a positive anyway for anybody politically. And I've seen some things on the news where, those on the red are like, well, hey, you guys wanted this. You said, you're sanctuary city. I don't think Oceanside ever did that, but like city of San Diego, stuff like that. And so now they're getting these waves of immigrants, and now they're starting to change the policies. You're starting to see that. And we've seen that with homelessness too, like with these no camping bans and stuff like that. The narrative is switched on the Democratic side because people are just fed up with it. Even Democrats, that are just voters, because it doesn't get exhausting.
It's like impacting their day to day.
Well, right, and once you start impacting somebody's day to day, that's when they start to take notice, and then it affects them. So then it could affect their ballot. I don't know how the county or the city of San Diego or any of these cities really can stop this, because it just seems like the feds are rounding them up. You're powerless against the feds to stop this kind of stuff. And so it makes you think, what is the Biden administration doing? If the facilities are full and you're not building more, not that they're like anything to write home about anyways, AOC once called them concentration camps, and conspicuously that rhetoric has disappeared over the last couple of years.
Yeah, they suck. They're not heaven. They suck.
Right. But you have to have somewhere for these people to go. But then at the same time, those who are already living here is like, well, what about our people that are already struggling, who are, just can't make ends meet, homeless or destitute, mental illness, like we just talked about with some of the, with the fentanyl issue. So what about them too? So now, you're just pulling at so many different threads there that it's going to be really difficult for people who are supporting some of this stuff, probably in the next few years, maybe even the next cycle, to really convince people that this is a positive way forward.
Hey, Stay Classy listeners and book lovers, mark your calendars. On October 21st at 6:30 p.m., journey through time and emotion with Molly Wyer's latest masterpiece, Californian. Unveil the secrets of 1920s Pasadena, mid-century La Jolla, and the soulful 70s Central Coast. Engage in lively discussion, meet the author, and celebrate the power of storytelling at Bird Rock Coffee Roasters in La Jolla. Don't miss this unique literary experience.
Sure. I get a lot of, or I see a lot of activity on social media and the news from conservative politicians in San Diego County recently. And it seems to be the suggestion, sometimes implicit and sometimes an explicit accusation, that the Democratic Party, specifically the Biden administration at the border, is essentially like opening the floodgates, that there's been rumors of them aiding or abetting like migrants crossing the border. Like I saw, I can't remember if it was a local mayor, but somebody was posting a video on the Twitter X about the agents actually cutting wire that had been previously put in place to allow these people to come through. So do you think that Republicans are just weaponizing this issue as much as they can, like pulling as many points as they can? Or do you think there's something to this notion that at the border, our government is sort of just like opening the door?
So I think both things are true. I think they definitely are weaponizing it in some cases. because obviously fear is a powerful motivator. All politicians do it, and but with the immigration, because that's been a hot button ticket. It's always been a hot button issue. The border, and especially if you live in a border region, from here to Texas. I haven't really seen much on the opening the fences and stuff. That if that's true,
that's not confirmed. I regret even saying that, but I will say that there is that general suspicion among people on the right, in California, that there's this sort of like stand by, open the floodgates, practice that's being directed towards federal agencies.
I mean, it's possible. I would think probably a more logical explanation is Border Patrol is just overwhelmed. They're just outnumbered massively. So they're just stretched thin as it is. And they can only do so much, right?
I'd be interested to know how many like migrants cross the border per like agent. Like there'd be an interesting like statistic.
Like a 4-to-1 ratio or something like that.
Seems like more.
Yeah, probably. But I'm just saying.
Yeah, it's going to be skewed for sure.
Yeah. So I mean, and if you don't have the facilities to handle these people, the proper facilities to either process them and get them in the system to be naturalized citizens, or you're going to deport them, then it's just sticks into the wind and good luck.
Well, another thing that we haven't even really touched on, as I recall so far, is the devastation of that happens when people actually cross the border to the migrants themselves, like the suffering that these people endure, like crossing the border. I mean, in Texas, it's a whole different situation because you have like the Rio Grande and it's a huge desert for, I don't even know how far, but so many people die on that journey. And then when you have people crossing the border, they're very exposed to traffickers. They're very exposed to gangs, cartel activity. They're very vulnerable people. And so there's a huge like death toll actually that occurs in the course of people crossing the border. The International Organization for Migration reported recently that nearly half of all migrant deaths worldwide in 2022 occurred in the U.S.-Mexico border zone. That's a lot. It says the 686 deaths counted by IOM's Missing Migrant Project are an undercount. Border Patrol's preliminary reporting a modest decrease in migrant deaths in 2023, but the full toll of this summer's record heat remains unclear. I mean, people die crossing because of thirst, because of heat stroke. Maybe speak to that, like sort of what policy solutions like actually help like these people that are so desperate to cross.
Yeah.
Or, like, I'm not asking for your opinion. I'm asking like what is being like proposed, like sort of like what's on the table, like what are Dems and ours like going back and forth about in terms of like how do we actually help these people? Like,
right. I think it's more of, because I think more on the our side of things, they want people to be documented, right? They want them to get into the pipeline so that they can be naturalized citizens and not undocumented and have to have that fear looming for who knows how long of potential deportation and, losing, your family, your homes, all those kind of things that they set up when they get here. And so it's tough, like, again, because there's almost no organization to it. These aren't dumb people that are trying to cross, right? They know what the score is on the political policy side of things. So that's why they're going through coyotes or cartels, and then they're basically now offering themselves up to, almost like slave-like conditions, right? Like, 'cause you're paying somebody and they can just hold that over your head for as long as they want now. Just when you get a job, you pay me, or, I kill you.
Horrible, the exploitation.
Yeah. And so, there's sexual exploitation as well. So it's, I mean, we need a complete overhaul to the system.
I'm wondering,
and the people need to come together and just put their egos aside, find common ground, build off that, maybe talk to some people too who've actually crossed legally, who've crossed illegally, and build a plan. Because these border towns, you just can't. The resources is just devastating, and it's hard to really function as a society if you keep getting these waves of people, because it just overwhelms your own resources and you can't take care of the people that are already living here. Then that just causes more civil unrest. So people need to come together.
Since the time I was a kid and reading news, like, it's always been, everyone says the immigration system is broken. And like, I think that like what we're talking about specifically is the process for getting a green card into the United States. For for many people is just incredibly difficult. It's incredibly long process. It's often not friendly to people who maybe don't speak English, maybe aren't as educated. Like the process is just not a friendly process. And I actually know friends of mine who immigrated from other countries who went through this process. It was extremely grueling, and it seems to be like everybody agrees, yeah, like the process has to change. I don't really know, and maybe you do. Like, what are like some efforts? And I guess we're not talking local anymore. What are some like efforts to sort of like reform the way that people get green cards, like the way that we process asylum seekers? Like, are any solutions on the table, or is it just like crickets?
I think it's pretty much crickets right now. Everybody's just barking back and forth at each other.
Yeah.
And of course, nothing gets done when you do that. Maybe there's something, I think it was Reagan in the 80s where he gave amnesty. And maybe that's a pathway forward, saying, hey, 6 months, if you're here undocumented or illegally, however you want to define it.
I know some people that like benefited from that.
Yeah, you get your 6 months, you get 6 months, and then, then it's back to game on. And so maybe that motivates them. Maybe you reduce the cost a little bit and, don't have them, they don't need to pay as much money, because I think that might be a problem too. It's like, well, if I have to pay, $5,000 to get in the system, but I can pay $2,000 to get over, well, which one do you get? Economics always, finances always plays into it. That's the bottom line. So
yeah,
you go the cheaper route, and then, unfortunately that's what it is. So, and it's just tough to, but at the same time, does the country have a right to kind of pick and choose, or, have its processes to make sure that, just not anyone is coming in either. So, I mean, there's some other countries that are way harder than we are to get into, that you need to learn the language within 3 years or you're bounced. And, that's just kind of the way it is. But, it's a mess. And that's not going away anytime soon.
Sure. Moving on, I want to talk a little bit about SANDAG stuff, if you're ready for that.
Oh, yeah.
Basically, today was the vote on SANDAG concerning the regional transportation plan, specifically the mileage tax, quote unquote. It was also called the road user charge. I sometimes forget which one is, I don't know. Anyways, road user charge was voted on today in terms of like whether it would be kept in the 2025 proposal of the RTP, and the decision was made 15-4 vote to remove the road user charge portion from the RTP. So what I wanted to ask you is essentially, first of all, can like the opponents of the mileage tax finally like celebrate? Is it really gone, or like what does this mean?
It's a big temporary W for them. They got to win, a big win. Because
why is it temporary though?
Because another board could always come back and put it back in,
like with different board members.
Yeah. Although the motion though today, and it was a little confusing because it was from Oceanside Riding Kime, and so I think like one of the things is they can't like talk about it anymore. Or lobby for and against it. I think Tony Kranz, Encinitas Mayor, had mentioned something about that.
Yeah. We can get to that, but basically his thing was that, it was, he called the motion essentially a gag order on board members, preventing them from discussing the road user charge at future meetings. That was his interpretation of the motion.
Yeah, and that may be. I haven't talked to Ryan yet, so would need to clarify that. But if true, then that's kind of a concerning thing, because it should be open discussion whether you're for or against.
For the record, John Duncan with Coronado vehemently disagreed with that interpretation of the motion. I was just on the phone with him on the way over here actually, and he was saying that was he used language I can't say on air, but he essentially, to the point that what Tony Kranz said was just completely misleading, that actually they can still talk about it, but there was a distinction between like talking about it as your personal opinion and talking about it as in your official capacity as a board member of SANDAG. A distinction that to me seems like it could be very easily blurred.
Yeah.
But that was his interpretation.
Yeah. So I mean, it got off the rails a little bit, that meeting today on that component. But I think the bigger issue is it's out for now. And so then the board, the staff will come back, or the board will come back on October 27th to finalize that removal. And then SANDAG staff will have to come back with a new plan without it. So, but here's something too. Is so last year, no, when I was reporting on this, I was speaking to CARB, the California Air Resources Board, a representative from there, and SANDAG about this whole RUC thing. And by 2035, they have to reduce emissions by 20% per the state mandates.
By 25.
By 2035. Excuse me if I said 25. So the RUC would guarantee, quote unquote, that they hit the 20%. Without the RUC, they'd get 19.1 in reductions. So that's why, a lot of them, the board felt, or the majority, the Democratic majority felt we could keep it in. Plus it's more equitable, those kind of buzzwords. Is that true or not? I don't know. I haven't seen the methodology behind that. I mean, in theory, yeah, right. You tax people out of their cars, they're going to drive less. So maybe, but here's another concerning thing about it is that in that conversation with the representative from CARB, there's a state law that prevents an agency, a city, or a county from taking credit for GHG reductions through electric vehicles. So I think that's one of the more concerning points, because basically, let's say if in San Diego County, EVs took away 50% of your emissions, transportation emissions, right? You have to hit 100%. Basically, now the state's saying you have to hit 150%. So how are you going to get another 100% if you can't count? Only the state's allowed to count the EV reductions, and that's probably for, any governor who wants to have aspirations of, being president or U.S. senator, something like that, right? And then another funny thing too that happened in the meeting, and I didn't really understand this, but Solana Beach Mayor Lisa Huebner, she's the second vice chair, she honestly thought that the RUC had already been removed from the plan. And that's been a big Democratic talking point for the last couple of years. It's like from December 2021 when they approved the plan, which had it in it, and then they had a second agenda item that said we're directing staff to remove it. So they're kicking that can down the road for 2 years, right? And so Huebner said, yeah, in my mind, it was already gone. It's not a big deal. And then she also said, well, it has to go to a vote of the people. I was on this. So last year, again, I'm talking to a SANDAG rep for a half an hour, trying to get a yes or a no out of them regarding that vote issue on the RUC.
Their ultimate assessment.
They wouldn't answer it. I called. No, I just got tired of, talking in circles. Yeah. Like, okay, you're not being transparent. And so then I call up CARB or dropping them an email, and CARB just punts. Oh, we don't know. You got to talk to your local air resource board. Like, why do we have to talk to the San Diego Air Quality Board? You're the overlord here. You're the one who does final approval. You should know this. So that tells me that the vote is not real. And so I don't know where Huebner got that from. It's really confusing.
It seems like if the people who are directing our municipalities are confused about whether the mileage tax is still in the plan or not, how is the average person supposed to make an informed decision or vote or just know about?
Well, right. I mean, at that point, you'd have to call them dishonest or a liar at worst, right?
SANDAG?
Well, just anybody who's saying that this is still in the plan, or this is not, or it hasn't been in the plan and never was in the plan, but it always has been. It's just not factually correct. So it's just, if you're behind the plan, just say, yeah, it's in the plan and I believe in it and this is the way to go forward, and just be an adult about it. But trying to insult somebody's intelligence is going to do more harm than good. And it's one reason why so many people don't have any faith in SANDAG just in general. And what's the reality that this plan in totality actually gets built? We're talking, as of right now, just in 2020 dollars, $172 billion. At year of expenditure, we're talking $269 billion. And the 2025 update hasn't even happened to where they have to redo those projections. Oh, it's going to be way more. Wow. And that's a federal spending plan, but on a local level on the backs of 3.3 million people. So for the RUC, for people to come out in arms to revolt against this could be a precursor for when the state tries to roll out its own, because the state is trying to get a state road user charge. And then there's also chatter on Capitol Hill in DC about a federal one. And that's bipartisan talk too, because the whole thought process is gas taxes will be shrinking because of mass adoption of EVs. So we need a revenue source to make up for that loss in revenue. The problem with this plan or this RUC, and another thing that people try to say, they'll say, I've heard Jack Schuss say it a bunch of times from La Mesa, and some other people, is that at least in the first couple of years now, they've gotten away from the rhetoric, is that it was, oh no, it's not an in addition to, it's just for EV charges, but that's not what it is. I asked Deputy CEO of SANDAG, Ray Major, to his face, is if I drive a gas car, I would have to pay the RUC too, correct? He said yes. So that's why people feel that, especially on the Republican side, that it's a double taxation.
Sure. So I have a question, which is I haven't really got a straight answer to, which is, so the funding mechanisms for the RTP there's just like so much ambiguity, at least in my research and my conversations. I mean, I've talked to a couple different SANDAG representatives, and I've asked about funding. With no mileage tax and gas tax going away, right?
Well, gas tax is never going to go away. It's just going to be less and less as more EVs.
So it seems like and then I was talking to one gentleman who was it was John Duncan from Coronado, and I was asking him, so he was sort of envisioning like an RTP with no additional taxes. I said, well, then what is the funding mechanism? And he said, well, state and federal grants. And I said, well, would that be enough? And he said, well, we don't know. So it seems like because I was asking if those tax initiatives have to go through voters, right, at the state level, through ballot initiatives, correct? So
Yes.
So then if that, but he was basically saying like, we don't want it. I would prefer not even get to like a vote. I would prefer we do the grants, but it doesn't seem like, have we actually outlined a scenario where we can do this without the taxes?
Oh no, not even close. In reality, looking at the plan, 'cause I mean, I've seen it's in Appendix V for anybody out there who wants to check it out on SANDAG's website. Shows all the funding sources, and so there's a lot of federal and state sources where they're talking about. But again, just let's say in a perfect world they got all those grants, then they could fund it, right? For the most part, assuming that the four taxes. So if the four taxes don't pass, you could build half of the plan just off those sources, but you're still contingent.
Half the plan, I mean, it's like
right, but you're still contingent.
It's like half a rail line. I mean, what does that look like?
I don't know, but again, the problem is this is all contingent on the state allocating exactly the same those amounts of funds, and then the federal government allocating those projected funds that SANDAG is requesting for. What's the actual likelihood in that? Zero. So now you got four tax increases on the table. So you got 3 half-cent taxes. 2 of those are countywide. One is specific to the city of San Diego, and then you got another one for rideshare. So the first half-cent tax measure didn't even get on the ballot last year. They didn't. It failed to collect signatures. So the SANDAG board, Democrat majority, right, in bed with labor unions and environmental groups, instead of them putting the tax measure up through a SANDAG vote, that would require a 2/3 vote passage by the voters. But when you do a special interest group, coalition type of thing, or just a resident-led ballot measure, you only need 50% plus 1 vote to pass. So that's why they went that route. Now, the coalition's back at it again, collecting signatures. So we'll see if they can actually do it this year and whether or not voters buy it. Considering that, gas is insanely high, inflation's still crushing people, interest rates are, way, out of control. There's just a lot of economic struggles for people out there right now. So, and then here's another one on the funding side of things too. A lot on the board on the Democratic side, they want free transit for all. So that takes anywhere from $12 to $21 billion out of the funding plan.
Yeah,
because they want everybody to ride for free, but you still have to pay for their rides. Like, I mean, the coaster is subsidized by about $100 a rider.
Mm-hmm.
So if you're taking out, exactly. Somebody's paying for it. And so does that mean if they're taking out that much money from just passenger fares, are they going to have to come back with another tax to try to? I just think this plan is too grandiose. In some ways, I mean, obviously, the goals are great, right? You want to lower air pollution, quality, less congestion. And yeah, it'd be great to have a functioning transit system, but I don't know if that is in the cards for this geographic area necessarily.
Sure. I mean, on that point, the last point you made about whether it's correct for the geographic area, I mean, my assessment, this isn't me giving my opinion about the RTV, but like my assessment is that politically, this is headed in a bad direction for Dems. That's my opinion, because of the fact that I don't think that shifting people out of their cars, pushing people towards more traditional forms of public transit, I don't think that that's like a winning issue for people. I think that, the majority of San Diegans want to see the freeways fixed. They want to see, they want to know more about what are we doing for the shift to automated vehicles. Like what's the future of that looking like? And, I've talked to Mayor John Franklin, Richard Bailey, others who talk about like sort of the future of, automated self-driving cars and, maybe even people not owning their cars, but sort of these rideshare cars that communicate with each other being the future of transit. I don't know. But my point is that the idea that we're going to push people to public transit, like, it doesn't seem like it's going to resonate with voters. Like, it seems like.
Yeah, I don't think, and it doesn't, especially on this plan with how much, they're trying to ask from residents to pay. It's a losing issue. And, they'll say, oh, look at Europe. Well, yeah, those cities are 1,000 years old, much different histories. And they're also
totally different infrastructure.
Underground systems too, for the most part. So you have much more flexibility when you're going underground instead of trying to go on stuff that's already been developed and built. And so it's going to be a challenge. And somebody can totally, if they want to, they can hang their hat on this and they'll probably lose.
Mm-hmm. I think out of the original, 5 to 10 topics I was going to go over, we only got through 3, but it was a good 3. Yeah. And honestly, like, I want to do this again, Steve, where we have some other plans in place to keep this going, keep you coming on the show. But for now, just really appreciate you coming on as always. And one last chance to shout out the pipeline, tell people the website again and how they can reach
feel free to subscribe at North County Pipeline. So it's ncpipeline.substack.com. Check us out on Twitter. You can check me out on Twitter at Steve Puterski. And check out all what's going on in North County.
Yeah, Steve's Dynamite Reporter. Thanks for doing this.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Yeah,
thanks.
Awesome. All right, that's a wrap.
This has been another recorded episode of Stay Classy San Diego with your host, Steve Wyer. Thanks again to our sponsor, MaxLux Media at maxluxmedia.com. Check us out at stayclassypod.com or any of our social media outlets. We're on YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and everywhere else you get your podcast content. Please like and subscribe to our channel. It really helps us continue bringing you important content that you're not going to see anywhere else. And thanks to all of our listeners for tuning into the show. See you next time. Stay classy, San Diego.